Okay, this is week 2 of Advanced Hebrew. So, the notes for this class are at theregathering.com/page/PFT Hebrew 3. And if you're looking for beginning Hebrew or intermediate Hebrew, those classes are recorded in their entirety, and you can find them on YouTube at the Passion For Truth video channel. Go to those, and in those classes I give you the links to the notes for those classes as well. So, beginning Hebrew goes through the entire alphabet, and intermediate Hebrew goes through the beginnings of grammar, and advanced Hebrew is going to the next stage of grammar. So that's where we are now. All right. So today we're going to be talking about a couple different things. One of them is one of the most significant topics in the Hebrew language, and it's called the sign of the accusative. Now, this is not a courtroom term. But like most phrases that describe something in linguistics, it's a long, fancy way of saying the object of a sentence. Just a quick little linguistic note. If you ever see the term accusative in linguistics, it's referring to the object of a sentence. Okay, so the sign of the accusative is an indicator that something is the object of a sentence. Just for, for contrast, the nominative is always referring to the subject of a sentence. We won't be using those terms terribly much in this course, but the sign of the accusative is this word called et. Aleph, segol, vowel, tav. And the function of this word is that it will immediately precede the word in a sentence that is the direct object of that sentence. It has no translation into English other than to let you know how to order the words in your English translation. Okay? So, how does this function? I'll introduce a name here to kind of illustrate how this functions. Okay, Yonah. Yonah is a Hebrew word that means dove. It's also the name of Jonah, the prophet. Okay, and I'll also introduce a root word. Okay, Aleph, Kaf, Lamed. Aleph, Kaf, Lamed means to eat. All right, so if we hail back to last week's lesson on the active participle, which can be used as the present tense, let's say we wanted to say, Jonah is eating. Okay, now Jonah is a masculine singular noun, so following the pattern that's on the sheets from last week, we would use the masculine singular form. Okay, so we've got our first radical, aleph. After the first radical comes our cholam vowel. Second radical, tzera vowel. And third radical. Okay, so if you follow along with the notes from last week, see the pattern: first radical, cholam; second radical, tzera; third radical. Okay, ochel. Okay, he is eating, or is eating. Okay, so Yonah is eating. Now we could just say that as its own sentence, but we wouldn't know what he was eating. So let's add an object to this sentence. Now I'm going to write the sentence wrong to begin with, and you'll understand why we need et. Okay, so we'll add an object. Hadog. Okay, Jonah is eating the fish, right? Dog is fish. We're adding the definite article to dog. So Yona ochel hadag. Jonah is eating the fish. Now in English, this is exactly how we would write this. Jonah is eating the fish. But remember what I said about Hebrew, word order is fluid. So we could write this sentence, Hadag ochel Yona. The fish is eating Jonah. But this sentence on its own could also mean the fish is eating Jonah. How do we know that Yona is the subject if the word order can be in any order? We don't know. And that is where et comes into play. If we put et in front of the object, now all of a sudden we know which is the subject and which is the object of the sentence. So if we wish to say that Jonah is eating the fish, we put an et before fish. Yona ochel et hadag. So now we know that Jonah is eating the fish instead of the fish eating Jonah. And of course, we know that that is an option. There's all kinds of sentences we can construct where it would be absurd to reverse the subject and the object. Okay, where it doesn't make any sense, but if we're talking about Jonah and a fish, well, how do we know which way that's going to go? Okay. On the other hand, if we wish to follow the biblical narrative and say that the fish is eating Jonah, we could simply put the et in front of Yona. Okay, et Yona ochel hadag, the fish is eating Jonah. Okay, and again, these can appear in any order. We could say ochel et Yona hadag. We could say et Yona hadag ochel. The most common way that we'll see this written, though, and again, any order is fine, any order is correct, but kind of the default standard way that a sentence would be written would be like this. Verb first. Okay, ochel, okay, is eating. Then the subject. So in this particular sentence, the subject is the fish. So hadag. Okay, so the verb, the one performing the verb, the subject, and then the one that the verb is being performed upon. So et, always precede your object with et Yona. Okay, so ochel hadag et Yona. The fish is eating Jonah.
That also goes back to what you learned in the past, where you're trying to decide which name is feminine and which is masculine. That comments, hey, if you didn't know what you was reading and didn't know the word, know that that's a man's name in the story from the Bible, you would say, okay, that's a feminine noun.
Yes, exactly. And that's why context is so important. She's mentioning the comments, hey, at the end of Jonah, because Yona is a word that means a dove, and that word is feminine. So if we were referring to a dove, this would be feminine, and then if we were talking about the dove eating the fish, which doesn't happen, because doves don't eat meat, but if this were...
You had a phrase, a sentence like, Jonah is looking at the dove, or is Jonah is something with a dove, you know.
Oh, okay.
Both in there.
If Yona was interacting with the dove?
Yeah.
Well, then yes, we'd have Yona twice. The one giveaway about that would be if we're talking about the dove, we'd always have ha Yona. So that would kind of be a giveaway there. Context would be important. There's ways of phrasing it that would make it more clear. The biggest thing that would make it clear would be doves and people typically don't perform the same kinds of behaviors. I mean, Jonah isn't going to lay an egg or fly, and the dove isn't going to be writing a book or taking a picture. So, right. So there are ways we could make it grammatically correct, but the interpretation would mostly be based upon common sense. So.
My common sense can take a back seat. But all right.
Right. Yeah, if we're reading it, you know. So, so anyway, yes, as I mentioned, the word order is fluid. The usual word order is verb, subject, et, object. Okay, verb, subject, et, object. Just want you to think of object as always going along with et, because you're going to use this et all over the place. Anytime you've got a transitive verb, which means a verb that has a subject and an object, you're going to find this et indicating the object. Okay? Another thing worth noting is that no matter that the object's gender and number don't affect the verb. Okay? So it's very important that the subject and verb match in gender and number, but the object could be anything. Okay, as long as the subject and the verb match. All right. And so,
And that is ochel.
ochel, yes. Ochel. Yes, he is eating.
It sounds like I'm hearing an H. That's why I keep going back there.
Right, yes. Not ohel, which is a tent.
That's what I keep
Right,
hearing.
but this is ochel, which is eating. Okay? So, that is the function of the sign of the accusative, indicating the object of the sentence. So, in this sentence, you know who is eating who. Okay? And of course, it functions with any verb besides ochel as well. All right, so from here on out, when we write out our sentences, we're going to include et, and that's going to tell us what the subject and object of the sentence is. One other thing worth noting is that it is important to use a segol with your et. Now, obviously, that's the correct spelling, so you should use it anyway, but there's another Hebrew word, eight, which is spelled exactly the same but uses a tzera, and it's a totally different word. It does not indicate the object of a sentence. So it is important to remember this segol in your et. Okay? All right, so that is et. All right, in your notes for this week, last week I had a page that's titled The Verb up top, and it had an error in it. So I've given you the corrected one. I misspelled the word for verb, so you can shred that other one or make it into a paper airplane or something, and so that one is correct. It's correct online. It has been for a while, so no need to worry there. But it is important. That's a great segue for me to talk about why it's important that I spell verb correctly. Verbs are categorized, or I should rather say that roots, Hebrew root words, are categorized according to which letters they have in which positions. So a root is 3 letters, and these 3 letters, okay, when we start talking about verb conjugation, these 3 letters have sort of code names. Okay? So we can call them the first radical, the second radical, and the third radical, okay, which means the first, second, or third letter of the root. But when we start talking about verb conjugation, instead of saying the first radical, we'll refer to it as pay. Whether it's a pay or not, we're talking about the pay position. And why a pay? Well, the second radical we're calling ayin, and the third radical we're calling lamed, because this is the word for verb, poal. Okay. I have it written on there with a full cholam, but you can actually write it with a defective one. But anyway, this is code for first position, second position, and third position. Pei, ayin, and lamed. Okay, so if we're going to talk about a root, okay, a root word whose third letter, whose third radical is a hey, or is an aleph rather, then we'll call that, we'll say that belongs to the class lamed aleph. Okay, so we've got a lamed, this double hash mark, and then an aleph, that means lamed, third radical position, is an aleph. Okay, so these will all start with pei, ayin, or lamed, corresponding to first radical, second radical, third radical, and then the actual letter that's in that position. Okay, so we categorize roots by these different categories. These categories are called gizrot. Okay, gizrot, singular is gizra. Okay, so a root that has an aleph in the third position is said to belong to the gizra lamed aleph. Okay, and so you'll get used to this terminology as we go along. We're going to use it quite a bit. Now, why do we categorize things this way? Well, because when we're conjugating these verbs, like I gave the conjugation of the active participle last week, the present tense, okay, so ochel, according to that pattern, we've got ochel doesn't belong to any special gizra, okay, so we've got ochel, ochelet for the feminine singular. Okay, masculine plural becomes ochlim, and feminine plural ochlot. Okay, so he is eating, she is eating, they plural are eating, or masculine, they masculine are eating, they feminine are eating. Okay, ochel, ochelet, ochlim, ochlot. Okay, all present tense forms of eating. Okay, so for, that pattern I gave last week applies to any verb that doesn't fall into a special gizra. Okay, but one of the special gizrot is lamed aleph. Okay, so I'll introduce another root here. This is a kuf, resh, aleph. Right, and this root can mean two different things. It can mean to call, and it can also mean to read. Kind of in the sense of read aloud. We will use it in both senses. But you'll notice that the third radical, the lamed radical, is an aleph letter. So this belongs to the gizra lamed aleph. All right? And the pattern for lamed aleph is a little bit different. I've got it on the sheet, but just to write out all the forms, the masculine singular form is exactly the same. Okay, so first radical, full cholam, second radical, tzera, and then our aleph is our third radical. I've got it listed on the sheet. I've got an aleph written there in place of the box with a 3 in it because it's always an aleph. All right, so koreh, okay, he is calling or he is reading. The only one in lamed aleph that changes in the active participle is the feminine singular. Now it's spelled with the same letters, but instead of segel, like in ochelet, we just keep a tzera here. So it becomes koreit instead of kore'et. So we just a, no vowel under the aleph, and go right into our tav.
So when you saw that first word, you immediately knew it was masculine. Is that so on koreh?
Koreh?
Yeah.
Yes.
How did you know? Because I'm like, okay, what told you that was a he is reading?
Well, it doesn't have to mean he. Well, okay, it's the masculine.
It's right there in the noun. Well, that's a verb. Forget it. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Yes, it's a verb. So it follows. So you know it's masculine because it follows the masculine conjugation pattern. So koreh, koreit, and the plural forms are the same, but they look a little bit funny with that aleph there. Okay. Kor'im. So just like ochlim, but kor'im. You've got that kind of awkward little pause because of the aleph there. And kor'ot. Okay. So just like the standard form, okay, this applies to any three-letter root. Any root whose third letter is an aleph will follow this pattern for the active participle, okay? And it's just one tiny little change in this case, okay, for this particular gizra. It's just the feminine singular. Okay, instead of it's just a.
You made two changes, and I'm going like, how would I know that? The saray went from a saray to a shavah, and then you added an extra holon in there, and I'm going like, okay.
Yeah, but the pattern here is identical to the pattern here. So it hasn't, for the feminine plural, it's the same whether it's lamed aleph or just a regular form.
Hey, you throw away tops. If you're trying to get the femininity, you want oat in it.
Right. For the active participle, for the present tense, that's the verb form. And again, we're talking all about verbs. All about verbs. Okay? But anyway, so the pattern is slightly different for lamed aleph gizra than for others. Okay? So, I introduced two lamed aleph roots. One is kuf resh aleph, which means to call or to read. The other is beit resh aleph, which means to create. And sometimes is used in the sense of to fill. Or many would argue that to fill is actually the original sense, and that to create, that's kind of the idea, is to fill something that's empty.
Because back what Ben was saying, God created, but then he told us to feel, because it was already created, it was just kind of empty.
Yeah, and there's a difference between to create and to make. And to make is kind of the idea that the substance is already there for you to make something with, but to create is to put the substance there so you can make something out of it. So this gets into theological ideas like creation from nothing, and this is the word that definitely would be used for that idea, okay, as opposed to make. Okay, so this would follow the same pattern as this, okay, so it'd be bo-re, bo-rate, bor-im, bor-ot. You usually find it in the singular in the scriptures because usually God is the one described as creating. It is used to apply to others as well, but in those senses it usually doesn't mean to create. It's usually a kind of parallel idea. To fill, actually in one sense it means to cut down. And I'm still not totally sure why it means that in that case, but whatever the case, so we've got to call and to create. Okay, and these are our two lamed aleph, okay, roots that begin that belong to the gizra lamed aleph. Okay, and they will follow this pattern, while other verbs will follow this one. All right. Another gizra that I wanted to point out today is gizra lamed he. Okay, so that is a root whose third radical is a he. And I've included a couple of those this week as well. Beit, nun, he means to build. And ayin, sin, he means to do, or usually to make. Okay, contrasted with bara, as I mentioned before. Now, the pattern for Lamed Hey is actually significantly different than these two. I've got the pattern there, but we will go ahead and conjugate to build with the active participle. Okay, so we've got our first radical, Vav Cholam, second. Instead of a tzera, we're using a segel. Okay, so boneh. So this is the masculine singular form, so if we wish to say Adam is building, Adam boneh, or boneh Adam. Okay? Feminine singular. Is actually Kametz Hey. First radical, full cholam, second radical, Kametz, and then our third radical, Hey. So if we wish to say that Rachel is building, Rachel Bona. And it does take some familiarity with the patterns to know that Bona is in fact a verb, and that we're not looking at some feminine noun that we weren't familiar with before. Okay? So Adam boneh, Rachel bona. And the masculine plural. The masculine plural, we actually drop the hey, and it becomes bonim. Okay? So if Adam and David are building something, Adam v'David bonim. Or if just a general they are building something, Haim bonim. Or if we are building something, Anachnu bonim. If we happen to be masculine. Feminine plural is, again, dropping the hey, bonot. So if Rachel and Sarah are building something, then Rachel v'Sarah bonot. Okay, or Hain bonot, or Aten bonot. Okay, you, feminine plural, Aten. All right, so that is the pattern for Lamed Hey. Boneh, Bonah, Bonim, Bonot. All right, so let's go ahead and put that together in a few sentences. All right. So let's talk about, let's go back to our subject, Jonah. And we want to say that Jonah is building a house. Okay, Jonah is building a house. All right. So we don't have to write it in this particular order, but I will. Actually, I won't do that because I want to walk you through the process of putting this together. Okay, so we've got our subject, Jonah. He's the one doing the building. All right, and Jonah we happen to know as masculine and singular. Okay, so we know our root for to build, Beit Nun He. We say, okay, this is present tense. He is building, not he has built or not he will build, but right now he's building. He's masculine and singular, so we need the masculine singular present tense form. Okay, there it is. We know we have to use our Lamed He pattern because it's got a He as its third radical. Okay, so far all you got to remember is anything, then last radical is an aleph, last radical is a He. And there's a limited number of these gizrot. It's not like every single letter in every single position has one of these. There's a limited number, so those are the ones you have to look out for. But anyway, we do notice this Lamed He, so we know we have to use our Lamed He pattern. Find masculine singular. Okay, boneh. Okay, so Yonah, boneh. All right, and what is he building? Well, he's building a house. The house is the object of the sentence, so it's important that we precede that with et. Because otherwise, we could translate this sentence to mean the house is building Jonah, which wouldn't make any sense at all, but it's still grammatically unclear what you're saying. And then, of course, is he building a house or is he building the house is a question, but if he's just building just a house, not a particular house, we can say et by it. Okay, so Jonah is building a house. More often you'll find the definite article after et, but you don't have to. But usually you will.
So if you had written Yonah B'nai et Habayit, it's Jonah's building the house. Right.
Yeah, is he building a house or is he building the house? Usually you'll say the house, just because, it's a little weird to just offhand be talking about the fact that Jonah is building a house. You're usually kind of focusing in on the house. So, so Jonah is building a house. How about Rachel is eating fruit of the vine? She's eating some grapes, or some strawberries, or something else that comes from a vine. Okay, well, our subject is Rachel. Right, Rachel, we know is feminine and singular. Okay, so to eat is, we know our root, Aleph, Kaf, Lamed. The only two Gizrot we know right now are Lamed Aleph and Lamed Hey, and this doesn't meet either of those, so we know we're going to follow the standard pattern for conjugation. All right, so it's present tense, she is eating. Feminine singular form, so we will use the feminine singular form, which is ochelet. Rachel ochelet. All right, our object, we know we need to proceed with et. All right, the fruit of the vine. Yes, fruit is pre. Vine I actually have in the vocabulary list for this week. And I'm gonna write this out separately to give us a little reminder about, I didn't talk about this. Good, this is, I didn't talk about this last week. This is the very end of my talk on the construct state, so it's good that I'm getting to this. Okay, so I mentioned last week, not to interrupt our train of thought in the middle of constructing a sentence here, but, okay, so we've already matched our subject and our verb, so we're good so far. We'll get back to this object in just a moment. I want to take a little aside here and finish talking about the construct state, though. When a phrase in the construct state is a definite phrase, so instead of saying a king's horse, okay, sus melech would be construct state, horse of king, right? But if we wish to say the horse of the king, okay, then we're going to need the definite article. The thing about phrases that where one of the words is in the construct state is that we don't have to add the definite article to both words. So if we wish to say the horse of the king, so this is a horse of a king. But if we wish to say the horse of the king, we only add the definite article to the second word. So it becomes sus hamelech. And this means the horse of the king. Now you might be wondering, how do we say a horse of the king if this is the case? We'd have to do something a little goofy to do that. You probably have to say one of the king's horses, but I haven't gotten into numbers yet, so we don't know how to do that just yet. But anyway, when we're using the construct state, the second word is the one that will take the definite article if it's a definite phrase. Okay? So, when we're talking about the fruit of the vine, that is a phrase in the construct state. Okay? The word of is our giveaway. So, pre is fruit. Pre. And the vine would be ha-gefen. Okay, so pre ha-gefen is the fruit of the vine. Right, so if Rachel is eating the fruit of the vine, right, Rachel ochelet et pri ha-gefen. Okay, so kind of combining these different grammatical ideas into a single unit. Right. And this pre-hagafen you may recognize as part of the blessing for wine. Okay, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pre-hagafen. Borei is indeed present tense masculine singular create. Okay, so it's who creates the fruit of the vine. Okay, you may notice though that in that prayer they don't use et, although they could. They very well could. In the prayer it's not, the context doesn't make it necessary. Okay. You know, the notion that the fruit of the vine is creating the king of the universe. It's not really necessary for them to specify, but grammatically they very well could use an et before pre-hagafen. For your purposes, I encourage you to use an et whenever you've got a direct object, because it makes everything clear, and that's why it's there, is to point out, hey, this is the object of the sentence. Okay? But yes, so. So, Rachel is eating the fruit of the vine. How about, well, let's use example I used before. Adam and David are building a house. Okay? We've got Adam and David, so and our prefix vav. David. Okay, so Adam David. Okay, they're both building a house, so both of these men are the subjects. Okay, so we've got subjects, plural, and they're both masculine, Adam and David, both masculine. So, we'll use our lamed he conjugation. And that, the masculine plural turns out to be bonim. Okay, Adam v'David bonim. Okay, now we've got our object. So we'll precede it with et. And a house, bayit, or the house, habayit. I'll just say the house just for fun. Okay, so Adam v'David bonim et habayit. Adam and David are building the house. And they'll probably get it done faster than Jonah, who's building it by himself. That's very true. That's very true. Jonah seemed inclined toward very simple houses, like just made of a vegetable. Adam and David might be a little more elaborate, like a Victorian-style house or something. But David, of course, was inclined to build rather elaborate structures. So. Okay, so that's how that functions. And I'm writing this in English word order so that we can think about each of the stages in that order. So we know we've got to match our verb to our subject, so we've got to know the gender and number of the subject first. Then we know our verb needs to match that.
So,
and then our object can come later.
I really was reading that in the Hebrew text. It might start out with bodim.
It could yes. In fact, it would very likely start out with bonim. You'd usually see this written, bonim, Adam v'David et habayit. Okay, so a lot of times you'll start with your verb, then you'll read your subject, and then you'll read your object. It could appear, again, though, in any order. You might have your object first, That
explains why sometimes when I was reading my Bible, I just flip over to the Hebrew part, and I'm going like, okay, where did this start and what this makes no sense?
Right.
Just go from right to left. It made absolutely no sense.
Right. Yeah, you can't just read the Hebrew and English word order because the Hebrew word order is so fluid. And so I've written this in the same word order that we would use in English. But that just kind of helps you see, okay, we are matching the verb with the subject, and then we've always got our et in front of the object. But yeah, the way you think about a sentence is a little different in Hebrew. I mean, it's the same components as any English sentence, but since they can be ordered different, and because word order doesn't affect the actual meaning, the main meaning of the sentence, it takes a little bit of rearranging in our brain as we're reading it. Because in English, the first thing you're thinking about is the first thing you say, which is the subject of the sentence. But in Hebrew, the usual word order, the first thing you're thinking about is the action that's being undertaken.
So that's good. So it's the action, then it's who doing the action, and what are they doing at the end? Is that the
and who is the action being done to?
Okay.
And then of course it can get really involved when we start adding prepositional phrases. Okay, and we've already covered some of those, but we haven't put them all together in a sentence just yet. So I do want to show another function, kind of how the et functions. It's important to put the et in front of every object in a sentence. So suppose that Sarah is eating bread and fruit. Okay, so Sarah is eating bread and fruit. All right. All right, so we've got Sarah. She can eat any number of things. She can have a whole meal out of this. Okay? Okay, feminine singular form is ochelet. Okay, so Sarah is eating. Okay. Et pri, that's right. She's eating fruit and bread. So we need to add our and prefix, which is a vav. The vav precedes the et. Okay? So va'et lechem. Okay, so if we have two objects, okay, and our objects are fruit and bread, okay, Sarah ochelet et pri va'et lechem. Okay, so she's eating fruit and object bread. Okay, so that's where you'll find that vav is in front of the et when you've got multiple objects. And when we had multiple subjects, of course, you just affix it directly to the subject because there's no need to point out what's the subject. Okay, that's what the et's for, is pointing out the object. So you do want to, when you've got ands, adding objects to a sentence, that and will come in front of et. And then, let's see. Yeah, it's a lot to remember, but at least the rules are consistent.
Repetition and it starts to sink in.
Yep. And actually, if you want her to eat meat too, that incidentally is one of the words on my list. So if she also wishes to eat meat, because Sarah does not have to be a vegetarian, then we'll just continue the sentence. Ve'et basar okay, fruit and bread and meat. And we could continue this indefinitely, depending on how hungry Sarah is.
Well, she's got a whole meal. The only thing she's missing is a beverage.
Yeah, we could also say, and she's drinking water or wine or something. But yes. And basar, I'll just make a note of this. Basar, you'll find, especially in the King James, translated as flesh. And usually when it's translated that way, it means meat, because flesh. Today, if you say, let's eat some flesh, that doesn't sound very appetizing, but that's what flesh means is meat. So anyway, just a note on that. It can be translated flesh or meat. And all right, well, any other questions about the sign of the accusative, also known as et, or about Lamed Aleph, Lamed He conjugation, construct state, or...
Complicated. Just turn that sentence around to how you would see it in the Hebrew text.
Right. And I do encourage memorization of some of the simple forms of verb conjugation, like the very first form I gave of the active participle. Okay, ochel, ochelet, ochlim, ochlot. Okay, he is eating, she is eating, they are eating, they are eating. I do encourage memorization of those. When it gets into really complicated conjugations later, like when we get into the past tense, the future tense, and the imperative and all that kind of stuff, they're going to appear in charts. And so when you wish to conjugate a verb a certain way, you'll refer to that chart. Okay, say, okay, this is, Gizra Lamed Aleph, and I want to say the past tense feminine singular. Okay, you just refer to that chart, line up all your grids, and go, okay, that's the form that I want to use. So, and over time, if you study it over and over, you'll start to memorize those. But there's a lot of them, and so knowing how to use the chart, is very important. It's just like knowing how to use a dictionary. You don't have to have the meaning of every single English word memorized, as long as you know how to use a dictionary. So, anyway.
So, ani ohelet tapua.
You're going to eat an apple. Very good. She said, ani ochelet tapuach, which means I am eating an apple. And that's exactly correct. So, all right. Well, very good. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week. Shalom.